Right, how about it's now saying where's the property?
How's that, Barrett?
I would say very similar to before.
All right, done. Redirecting you to YouTube. Is it working? Right, how about it's not saying where's the property?
How's,
All right, let's look at it.
I'm gonna try connecting through my phone then.
Okay.
All right, we'll do that.
All right. We are broadcasting on YouTube. We have all members present. So, Mr. Chairman, get us started. Kick us off.
All right. So we left off at, what page was it? 5-127?
We did, but we received comments back to page 123.
Okay.
So I would propose we start there with the list of comments that were circulated. Is that all right with everybody?
Yep, please do. Lead us off.
All right. Well, we are going to continue with our review of Module 2 of the Land Development Code update. I think we all are prepared to discuss the rest of Module 2, and we will see how far we get. And yeah, with that, let me find my spot. We start on page 5-123. I'm gonna start sharing the screen here. Can everybody now see the text?
Yes.
Okay. So the first comment was from Kathleen on page 523. Footnote, is this applied citywide? And these are the residential compatibility standards. Is that, Kathleen, is that your question? Yeah, they
Correct.
are. Yep, these are applied citywide. Right now, they're in place for downtown, but this would basically apply to any commercial development abutting single family neighborhood.
Okay.
So kind of like before, I think what works, I think has been working well is if the author of the comment kind of wants to state it, and then we can all discuss it. So rather than you'll hear enough of me talking anyway. So if you go to comment 2, Kathleen, that's yours as well.
Yeah, I was just the density of the bushes of what they were asking for on B, you know, the 6 trees, 60 shrubs per 100 lineal feet. Again, when you start planting that, how is that? I mean, are they going to survive if they're in front of each other? And, you know, are they going to be able to get enough sun? Is it going to be enough? I mean, you hate people to waste money on landscape and then it dies because of the quantity of what we're making them put in.
Sure. And this is consistent with what we do now.
Okay.
It does seem like a lot, but you have to bear in mind that it's 10 feet wide. So that's why, I mean, you're just, if you think about it being linear, 100 linear feet, but it's 100 linear feet by 10 feet in width. So that's why you can kind of stagger them to get that fullness and thickness that you're.
Okay, so I don't know that I see where it says it's 10 feet wide.
Up here, so I have a 10-foot wide buffer that includes.
Okay, got okay.
Right, so it's 50 feet. It's going to be 3 trees and 30 shrubs in a 50 by 10 area.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And number 3 is yours as well.
Yeah, I was a little concerned with just reducing down that it's specifically that the community development director can just reduce it down, the parking to below the minimum of what we set here in the land development code. And that just, I don't, I don't know why we'd want to allow to be reduced below the minimum.
This, if, this is similar to, the intent is this is similar to how it is in the off-street parking section, is that it has to be through an alternative parking plan. And that's like includes shared parking and valet parking, and things like that. So this is just consistent with that.
But do we allow on those other things that you just mentioned, off-street, shared, and valet, to be reduced even further by the CDD?
Yeah, through an alternative parking plan. That's like that's the key part in there, is that it can't just be on a whim. It has to be through a proposed alternative parking plan where it shows how they meet demand. If I'm not mistaken, that's very similar to what we do now.
It's a lot of what you find throughout a lot of planning departments, because a lot of these parking numbers are based on national studies on parking standards, but there's not a one size fits all. If a developer comes in and says, look, I do something that's a little bit different than that average because we don't match exactly, and I can show you that in my examples of my other projects, we can park at this rate. If they can prove by a study or an alternative method that's in that list that their numbers are different than our standard, then we've always had the right to modify it. Same thing for increasing. If they go way above the standard, we usually ask them to justify why you need more than our maximum.
Okay. Okay. And then the next one, just oh, you know what? I think I have the wrong page. Well, no, I don't. Well, yes and no. And I think I missed one because the building setbacks, I had right there B1, where it says except as provided in subsection 2 below, all buildings shall be set back a minimum of 50 feet from the lot line of the protected development.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know how that works on like Maitland Avenue or Horatio Avenue. Because I don't know that those lots have are they big enough to have a 50-foot setback?
So
because the ones off of Maitland Avenue, I don't know that they don't abut right. Oh, I see.
Some of them do.
Yeah, some of them do. I see what you mean.
So how do you put a 50-foot setback? You see what I'm saying? Again,
are you saying so? If it's a 100-foot wide lot, then it would have to be like pushed up against the Maitland Avenue side, essentially.
correct.
I brought the same thing up, Kathleen, about a different, like, I think it was related to lakes or something, but it was the exact same comment. What happens if you don't have it?
Right. Well, and then, right. So do we not do development because of that? Or, and I mean, that's my question is, again, I'm just trying to visually see how do you do a 50-foot setback on, like you just said, a 100-foot lot?
Well, you do have the exception here below where if you provide an 8-foot masonry wall, you can reduce that buffer to 35 feet. And that was something that we put in there because we thought, and not in all circumstances is 50 feet appropriate, and so that would come into play there. So you'd have a 35-foot setback from the protected development. And you would just have to, it's a matter of certain kinds of development on that corridor district of Maitland Avenue. You just have to, it'd be a challenge for how you orient your buildings, essentially.
Right. Okay. And then down to the table, same thinking or line of thinking on that table where it's 100 feet to 150 feet. The maximum height lesser of 4 stories or 45 feet. And again, I'm just trying to, like Glenn, with the visual. How would that work on a Mercedes dealership property? Just again, taking that lot, it's long, it's not wide, and it backs
Right.
up to a neighborhood.
Correct. And so, yeah, it's long and wide. Well, they wouldn't be allowed to go over 3 stories, which I don't think they are currently. I don't believe that garage exceeds 35 feet. They have an 8-foot masonry wall. I don't know what that wall exists right now, but I don't think it's 35. I don't think that it's set back 35 feet. I think so. If those standards were applied today, I think you'd see that building pushed back away from that residential development. Do you know how far that existing structure is from Versailles neighborhood? For that,
I don't. But you know, when you kind of look at it driving by, and then the other thing is how much closer can you push it to the street?
right. Well, I think it's fair to say that if that would be something that would be really interesting to do in our testing phase, is apply these standards to a potential hypothetical redevelopment of that site. I think you would see that the building, instead of having parking in front where there's cars parked, I think our standard would call for that development to be pushed up to the street. So the building would be closer to 1792, but it also calls for parking to, when possible, not to be next to the residential neighborhood. So I don't have that complete answer, but it would be a very interesting test case.
In this one, we may need to have some relief language. The language that's in there about the 100 feet, 150 feet, that was specifically added by council during the comp plan amendment when we were doing the Main Street future land use. During the introduction meeting, council specifically said there's 2 sections along Main Street that we want a wider distance of setback, and one of them was that area where the Mercedes dealership is, and the other one was down by like the Enzion area. They said those 2 areas we want instead of 100-foot transition, we want it up to 200 feet transition. And so that's how the comp plan was adopted. So this was just kind of following suit with the comp plan. If we need to have some kind of relief mechanism or potentially, through a PD, they can ask for a height variance or something like that. That's something we can definitely consider doing.
Okay.
It's a good point though, because that is a long skinny piece.
Right.
What is going on here? Why can't I do comments?
The exterior lighting on 127, and it says the source of illumination is not visible from a public street right of way or an adjacent protected development. I mean, I understand the protected development, but why wouldn't you want a public street right of way thinking of, street or sidewalk be lit?
You don't want glare and projected in people's eyes what they're driving. I mean, lights for the right of way. I mean, my answer would be the lights for the right of way are specifically designed for illumination, for safety. So if you imagine like security lights, these specifically applies to lights on a building. If you imagine like a security light shining out from a building that crosses over into oncoming traffic, we don't want that happening.
Okay.
That's the idea. Oh my God, I'm struggling here. I can't.
It's not letting you put.
It's not letting me put comments on, and this is like, what's going on? I might just have to close this. Let me close it and reopen it.
While Barrett is trying to get the screen working, we had a case on, I think it was Maitland Concourse South, where the building decided to install some what they called security lights, and they were really, really bright, almost like floodlights, all up along Maitland Boulevard, along that building. And we were getting a lot of complaints, even from the brightness that you could see it across the street or even on the street. And so it's just really to protect something like that happening.
And I'm sorry, where was the property that?
It was Maitland Concourse South, the offices on the south side of Maitland Boulevard.
Okay.
They had gone in there and just installed these really, really bright floodlights that were, instead of pointing down, they were pointing straight out, and it was lighting up a lot of area that it didn't need to.
Okay. And then the next one is the signage right below it. A minimum of 150 feet from the lot lines. And kind of what Glenn and I were just talking about, what if you don't have 150 feet?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially there. I mean, there's a lot of lots that won't have 150 feet, so I think that's a good catch.
We'll probably have to write a standard, or when, in cases where that's not possible, then there's an alternative. Right, so,
There we go.
okay.
Okay, and then the next one on right below that. So the perimeter fence or wall, and it says, you know, where a development subject to these standards abuts a protected development, a wall 6 feet in height using materials permitted. And then if you go back to 125 at the top, it talks about a solid masonry wall at least 8 feet in height that is compatible. So,
Yeah, I see how that's a little confusing, but the 8-foot wall is only if you're using it to reduce the required buffer. So in other words, if you're want to go from 50 feet to 35 feet, you have to use an 8-foot masonry wall. Otherwise, you can use a 6 feet high wall, and it can be other materials. So there has to be a wall. It's just that there has to be a wall no matter what. It has to be 6 feet tall, use those materials, but it has to be an enhanced wall, 8 feet in height, and specifically masonry if you're reducing that buffer from 50 to 35 feet.
okay, so should we say in there then just a wall 6 feet high using, and then just put in or input other materials permitted so that it's a little bit clearer? Does that make sense?
585 is just referring back to the material standard. Are you mean in the previous mention, in the previous?
No, where we are in 127,
Mm-hmm.
it, perimeter fence or wall. and
Right.
It says a wall 6 feet high using, and I said, should we insert other right there, materials permitted? Versus, because the other one you said, now I understand, it says a masonry wall at least 8 feet high to get the 35 feet, but this one is, you can
Yeah,
do the.
I mean, you can't. We don't want to exclude masonry. You can, and this has actually a link. You can kind of see how I'm activating it. So when this code is online, you will be able to, or a PDF, you can follow the hyperlink. It'll take you right there. And so the materials, the first thing is masonry, ornamental iron, or decorative metal, painted wood, composite materials.
Okay.
And prohibited. So I don't know that we need to change it, but
Okay. No, I understand.
yeah, it is. It's a little confusing. Granted, it is a little confusing because we added that. We've done a little tinkering with this, but
Okay. And then I was wondering on the bottom there under K, it says limit trash collection or other service functions to only the hours between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And I just was wondering like how you could regulate Waste Pro or one of these other dumpsters, because I know a lot of times they're picking up at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning to commercial buildings.
that's the key, is commercial buildings, and we're gonna have to. That's when, if this is adopted, they'll have to put off the commercial buildings within, adjacent to the residential zones until 7 o'clock. And I'll just be part of the ordinance. So
Right, but again, who's gonna enforce it?
it's a code enforcement thing. If somebody takes a picture of them and sends it to the city, we'll call them and tell them to stop. I mean, ultimately, they're contracted through the city, so if they're violating their contract, if they're violating city ordinances, we have mechanisms to enforce that. But it starts with code enforcement, just like any other part of the land development code, like noise, which I think is the next one that Keith had a question on. On that same the second section here is. What?
Is she okay with that answer?
Oh, does that make sense? Or okay with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it.
And I think that's kind of the same answer for number 9. Keith, is that? I mean, all of this, this whole section does apply to non-residential uses. Are we good with that?
I am. I don't know about Keith.
Your microphone's off, Keith, I
I
think.
think you're muted.
I am. Yeah,
Oh, there we go.
yeah, I'm back. So I missed the point how you tied it to my comment.
So
Was that-
how does this protection apply? Why don't you explain your comment, and maybe I'm not understanding.
Well, I was trying to, and I didn't go digging way far back, but I was trying to understand is how do these protections apply, across? So if you've got a non-residential area backing up to a residential area, how do these noise limitations, does that apply for those situations, or is this purely a residential restriction?
The restriction is for the non-residential. It's saying if you put up a restaurant or something next to a protected development, then you have certain noise requirements and sound levels that you can do.
Okay, I must have misunderstood where I was at in the,
Yeah, because we are in the neighborhood, in the residential compatibility standards. So this
It applies to all non-residential going up towards the residential.
compatibility between existing single family and more intense forms of development. So this only applies to those areas that are abutting an existing single family or 2-family dwelling.
okay, I mean, as long as you're telling me that it does apply to, that this crosses over non-residential to residential and it applies, then I'm okay.
Yeah, it does. This specifically applies to the areas that are non-residential, but abutting a residential single-family neighborhood.
Okay,
We've got those in place for downtown now, and this is, like I said, expanding these protections to other parts of the city.
But Keith, that means you can sit on your porch and play a saxophone really loud, and it doesn't matter if you bother the non-residential.
the problem is the sound comes back at me. It doesn't go away.
Well, then you better be a good saxophone player.
Yeah, I know. Not so good.
All right, and Keith, the next one is yours, and I'm prepared to answer it, but why don't you?
This is the one I have on 5-129.
Yeah, number 10.
Yeah, this was the one about alteration. I thought we discussed this in another section about having that defined somewhere, but I didn't go looking back.
You're right, and I don't think we do. I know, I do think we had this discussion, and we have been having this discussion throughout. I don't know that we settled on an answer. Dan and I were looking through the Florida Building Code this afternoon at their definition of alteration. But yeah, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but you're absolutely right. I think that we need to have one that applies to the whole code and clearly distinguishes when something is a repair or just a maintenance versus an alteration, because it has
Either it's in our we add it to our definitions, or we can reference, some definition.
The problem is we looked at a lot of different definitions. We looked at dictionary definitions, black law, planner's dictionary, building code. And I think what ultimately is going to happen is we're going to have to kind of take a hybrid of some of those and make our own, because all of them were decent, but none of them really captured everything well. Some of them were too stringent, some of them were too lenient. So I think we might have to come up with our own hybrid one.
Yeah, I think you're probably best, because that's one of those loose words.
Yeah.
okay. 2B.
Just under the exemptions, it says, any dwellings located above a non-residential use is exempt. And I'm like, well, why would you want to exempt them and not still have the quality of a standard versus, not having it?
That's a great point, but they do have standards. It's just going to be the commercial design standards. So after C, if we go later on in that section, there are the non-residential and mixed use form and design standards. And all that's saying is, even though they're residential, you apply the mixed use design standards to them.
Okay.
Not that they're exempt from standards, but that's what's covered in the footnote. If you go to the footnote, that clarifies it. So it says dwellings above a non-residential use, the non-residential and mixed use standards discussed below would apply to the latter.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And this similarly on this, I think you pointed out this 35%. It says 50%.
Yes.
I think that's applying. We looked, and it is a little confusing because you have several percentages here, but that's depicting A. So it says no more than 50% of off-street surf parking may be located between a building and the street. So that's what. So here you have it, parking between the building and the street. The 35% figure is off-street parking behind a building.
I had a question coming up that's related to all of this. Why do we call it 3 and 4 unit dwellings versus just 3 or more?
If I'm not mistaken, they're treated differently in the use section and in the building code, right? I think the building code distinguishes between single family and duplex, and then 3 and 4 family. But do you mean just like, why is it like?
Yeah, like you're right. Why not 3 and above? Only when you say 4 family, that's like a quadplex.
Yeah. So basically, it's divided in single family, duplex, triplex, quadplex, and then apartments. Everything above a quadplex is an apartment.
Okay.
But in the there's different standards in the Florida building code, is that
Right.
correct? Right.
Okay, this will answer one of my questions later. You can just, you'll see. And
Sure, but yeah, it's distinguished in the use table as well, I think. But Keith had the next question, and it's kind of distinguishing this graphic where it's labeled street and street, and you're like saying, well, hang on, this is not behind the building because it's on the side of the building.
Yeah, there's a couple of issues here. One is we talk about primary street in the first diagram, and then we say street in the next diagram. So the question is, are those two the same thing?
In the first diagram, which one are you talking about?
Oh, you had it up there. I'm talking about the two images.
Right. It says street and, okay. Oh, primary street, gotcha, right.
Yeah, so there, we talk about a building in the primary street. And then the next one, it talks about when screened from the street. So is primary street and street the same thing?
I see. Because it does talk about external streets, internal streets. It doesn't even, the text doesn't mention, doesn't distinguish between primary and secondary.
So my point is, I think unless we're giving them equal meaning somewhere, either we need to call everything by a specific type street or define street as something.
Well, and to your point, so take the corner of like Maitland Avenue and Sibilia Parkway. Which one of those is considered the primary? I would assume Maitland Avenue. So then it would be oriented to the primary, which would be Maitland Avenue, right?
Yeah.
Sibilia?
Unless that is just basically saying that generally, when you have a primary street, only 50% of the parking can be in the front. But I think what they're saying is regardless of the street, as long as you hide the parking by another building, then it's okay, regardless of the street type. I think the intent is just to hide the parking.
Right.
Because I think in that graphic, they were putting 100% of the parking in between, but they were hiding it. That's the way I read it, is that they want at least half the parking hidden, but in the case below where they're putting all the parking in front, they can do that as long as it's hidden by another building.
Well, and to the second drawing down there, I believe I'd have been less confused if we didn't show both streets.
We just take that second street off.
Yeah, I mean, with what they were trying to explain, to me, it confuses the issue. When you add, unless you label one primary street and the other secondary street.
Well, I think that the only reason they showed that second street is because they were trying to show somehow how you get into that parking lot.
And I think that's fine. I think what I'm hearing is all of this is around a primary street. So it's labeling these primary street. And maybe you label this one on the side there as secondary street, if you want to have that.
Okay. So your next comment about whether this is an illustration of this, right? Where, if I understand your comment, we're only in cases where no other practical orientation exists. I don't think this is illustrating buildings oriented towards parking. I think this is trying to show the correct way of how to orient it, which is either towards the street and away from the parking.
Well, I think it's just the way they worded this. So I'm there. I don't have any, it just all of a sudden it has this reference to multi-building development orientation.
Oh, I see.
And so I don't know if I'm just reading this all too literal, but I'm reading this paragraph. And then it creates this sort of default statement. And then all of a sudden it just says see figure. So either tell me what I'm looking at that figure for, or move that default sentence after referencing the figure.
Got it. I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And then the next one is just again, we're calling facade shall face a street and incorporate wall offsets. Again, it's just terminology. Are we talking about the primary street?
Right. In which, so it's right. Okay. So would it be? I think what they're saying is just if any building that's facing a street has to have these facade things. Now, I don't think it makes a distinction between primary or not. So the facade shall face a street. Facades of all buildings that face the street shall incorporate wall offsets. So I'm sorry, what was the concern was that it's not clear if it's all streets or just primary streets?
Yeah, so I guess that would be the thing. If you take that approach, then go through anywhere it just says street. And if you feel like that it doesn't matter what type of street it is, that the terminology is relevant. But it seems like some of these they're actually talking about primary street. This one they may not be, but
Right. Okay. You're worried about on comment 16, I guess worried's the wrong word. Concerned about the issues of like really faux porches, like fake porches.
yes. So do we have a definition? I mean, I've seen people put, something that's just enough to get a column out in front of the face and they call it a porch. And you can't put a chair on it. You can't walk on it. So that if that's important to us to have it actually mean a usable porch, then we set a minimum.
In the same way that we have at least 12 inches, the bay windows, it says how they have to be projecting. It would be the same deal. So how much?
Right.
Just be
Right.
okay. Gotcha. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure we don't.
But the downtown standards are very specific. Maybe not.
I don't think it said a minimum size. Okie dokie. Moving right along. All right. So yeah, this other one is another good comment that I don't know the answer to, but
Yeah, I didn't go back through my FBC, but I know there is something in there on parapet heights relative to wind loads. And I wanted somebody to verify that, because if the code said, anything over 2 foot 8 inches, you have to do this extra protection. I just wanted us to understand that and not put something on, our builders that will cost them extra money when 4 inches didn't mean that much to us. And I guess that is part of that question. What was driving that 3 feet? Does that have to do with concealment of roof equipment, or what was the thought?
Yeah, that's generally the height that we have our parapets out now, just to hide it. We had Peacock Ford recently went and put parapet walls all around to hide their screening, because they originally didn't do that. So we had to do that. And I know they came in with different materials. Some of them were like 4 feet tall, some of them were 2.5 feet. And based on the material, because the different materials met different wind load requirements. And so they were saying, if you wanted us to go this height, then this material is most appropriate for the building code wind load. But yeah, the 3 feet was generally to block equipment.
Yeah, and if you feel that's what we need in the conditions you've seen, I just wanted to draw that to attention.
No, good thing to check. All right. In the Kathleen, what was the roof should be screened all the way around?
That under D, kind of just what Keith was talking about with the screening. You see where it says it should, to me, I read that as just being a partial screen, whereas to me, it's driving by first watch and you can see all the, because they just have it like in the front versus you can see all the mechanical equipment on the roof over there.
Or the plaza next to first watch, you're right. You can see all the mechanical in there.
Well, well, never mind, I won't say that. No, and that's a good point. Generally, we require the parapet on all sides that are visible from off-site. So if you're driving down the road, no matter what angle you're looking at, if you can see the equipment, we require it. If it's the back of a building and it just backs up to another, like in the case of First Watch, it backs up to the mini storage. That one, granted, First Watch is such an old building that it's several codes before us.
Right, but I mean, again, a visual, and Glenn, you got it, that you can see it when you drive down 1792.
So does this cover it require screening on all sides visible from the street?
Is it visible? Is the importance the street, or as we get into more bike trails, we don't want the bike trails to be in the back of house, so it's almost just visible from the public.
From the public right away?
I think so. It's because it's not just street orientation that we are beginning to care about.
That makes sense. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Okay. $33A. Keith, is this in a similar vein as your previous comment that just the way this is phrased makes it look like they're exempting parking structures from this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's confusing. It's confusing me as to what is their focus for this image.
Gotcha.
Because I was having to really look at it to just ignore that last sentence. I like my pictures. I want to make sure I can understand them.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I mean, I hope it goes without saying, we've been doing this for a long time. If other commissioners have comments on these sections that didn't make it into the written comments, I just want to remind everybody it's perfectly all right to jump in, interject at any time. Next one is on 134 on the applicability section. Was this kind of what you were thinking about, whether this is redundant because the whole title refers to non-residential and mixed use form and design standards?
Well,
on 20.
Well, it was, are we saying the same? So the title is non-residential and mixed use forms, and then down under applicability, it applies to new commercial and mixed use development. Was that just, did it mean the same thing, or does it mean something different?
Oh, because this is not the distinction of non-residential versus commercial.
Yeah.
I got you now. Okay.
Hi, kid. Where are you going? Here.
Okay. Pretty easy fix, I think. For 21. Is this your concern that it talks about plazas, seniors, pedestrian connections, and gathering spaces?
Yeah, it just seemed like you would have something more. This is a pretty generous image.
And it's true. I believe that it's intended to show pedestrian connections too, because that's what's, I think, illustrated by the yellow lines.
Oh, okay. Well, then they need to draw attention to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I mean, this is a, opportunity for, I don't know, the plaza seating area. Anyway, just seemed like a lot of image, and we did not call out a couple of things.
Definitely. Okay. All right, comment 22. I think this is yours, Glenn.
Yeah, so, feel free to correct me if I misinterpret this, but sometimes I worry when we get into facade colors and some of the specificity. It was our discussion a couple weeks ago when we said, hey, we shouldn't be telling somebody no St. Augustine grass. Are we prepared to police this kind of thing? If we're getting into saying your color must be a particular type, then that might mean they have to permit it so we can make sure that it is. And is this the business we want to be in?
Sure. Dan and I discussed this earlier, and we have Dan has thoughts on it. Oh, you look like Dan looked like you're pivoting around to answer the question. So
Yeah, I was just getting comfortable.
Okay.
In any non-residential development, we require a site plan that requires elevations, and those are tied to the approval process. So any change in any external piece of a non-residential development has to go through a site revision or a minor site revision. In a case where it's a simple color change, it's just merely them saying we're painting it from this to that, and it's a simple okay. But unless they're obviously doing like bright purple or something. But we make that anytime any building does a change. Say if Maitland City Center adds something outside, whether it's outdoor speakers or railing or ceiling fans that weren't on the original approved plan, we make them do a minor change to it, which is a fairly simple, quick process. It's just something so we have documentation of what was approved, but we do have the ability and the right to regulate non-residential developments like that. Single family is a little bit different. Our powers are limited on single family regulations as far as colors and houses and stuff, but non-residential, including multifamily, we can. And part of this code is to write the regulations that we want to see, because if we ask for it, they'll do it. If we don't ask for it, then it's a whole lot more difficult to get what we want.
So we do the stuff over pretty trivial things right now, like adding a generator. Like if it adds to the footprint or the impervious surface of a site, we have to go in and sign off on that. So even if it's relatively minor, or like Dan said, a ceiling fan.
No, and I get those things. I guess what caught my eye was facade colors being consistent, that we just, maybe when the plan first comes through, but years later, if somebody wants to, their designer, and I have no skill sets in this whatsoever, their designer says, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be Art Deco and paint something one color? And is that what we're saying here, is that they're not free to paint?
No, all we're saying is that if they use that's only one option available to them. If they design their building with actual facade articulation instead of this like faux articulation, we're saying, you can achieve this facade articulation with paint color material, if they should not requiring that they do that, or say that they were. So I guess that's a little different. To me, that's a little different. We're probably not as like an option to achieve one of these design goals. And if they do, then yeah, they can't probably 5 years later, they can't go and like paint that one big solid color. I get the concern that it's kind of a lot to track, but in this case, I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to see.
Well, I think you want, and I don't think this is saying that necessarily we're dictating specific colors, but you want some oversight. I mean, there's, you're assuming somebody's getting a designer to pick the color. And that's not always the right assumption. And even a designer, could do something that's really hurts the others around them.
I mean, so this then probably follows up to Kathleen's comment on the next one. Metals, why not metals? Are we getting into that kind of specifics? So I put out that was my comment, and I'm not stuck on it. So if you guys are all good, then I'm good too.
It's a good comment, I think.
Yeah. But folks are okay leaving it as it is right now.
Honestly, I think my issue with it is that if I'm reading this correctly, what this is saying isn't about a specific color or the number of colors, but you're looking at a single plane and you're allowed to use paint to create articulation. So there's no change in depth. And personally, to be kind of blunt, I feel like that's a little cheap, maybe, to just kind of paint a swath in a contrasting color. I don't know how I feel about that aspect of it.
And that is why I said my caveat is I may misinterpret this. So you're probably correct. So I understand.
No, it's okay. I mean, if we can, it's free to change or alter. If people have, suggestions for how they'd like it to be read otherwise, or if that should be struck as an option. Here again, this is kind of how it's meant. They've changed the materials. You see that in Maitland City Center too, across the street. It's like they use tile and several of these materials, and it looks. If done wrong, it could look kind of busy, but if it's done right, it does achieve that idea of trying to make it a little more visually
But
interesting.
that is kind of my point. Who are we to say, like, and we don't get into that type of typically regulation, I wouldn't think.
Well, we're telling them what we want to see, right, when they design it, because otherwise if they come in with a blank big box, that's a single color and a flat wall, we don't have anything in the code that tells them otherwise. So it's,
And I
yeah.
get the flat wall. I think Walgreens is probably, when we go do these test fits, I think Walgreens is a really ugly building and poor attempt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think the to Jamie's point, the way I'd see it is that can't be your primary way of creating feature on a building. I mean, it can work if maybe it's like, maybe there is a texture stripe, but that the whole building can't be trying to build variations in depth by just using different paint colors.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
And the best application of an accent material would be something that is on a projecting wall, and then the material wraps and dies on the inside corner. So if you do look at the Maitland City Center, it's slight, but there are reliefs and a variety of materials that makes it work. I think the way it's written now is you could just take a big blank wall and put like a vertical.
You could add something in here, the change in color, applied through, reveals or a change in texture. But yeah, just painting that, drawing a line and painting one color on one side of the line and one on the other.
Yeah.
That's where it starts getting that lesser appeal. But yeah, a reveal would give you at least a breakup in plane.
Are you wanting to add a change in texture as one of the options, or under B, instead of saying the following techniques may be used alone or in combination, take out the word alone and say you have to have at least.
Yeah, I think you could add, and I'm not thinking on how to wordsmith it, but you could do that use of change in color is okay with it, if you're doing a change of texture or providing a reveal that separates the change in color.
I think what we're going to keep coming back to in this section is that a lot of these things have a level of subjectivity to them that you just can't know by writing the code. Sometimes it takes someone coming in with a set of plans to really be able to analyze it and apply. Because I could also see how if you were to do horizontal, that's like kind of on trend right now to do a lower in like a dark gray and a white on top or something, but that's not gonna last either. So it's just, it can be, yeah, I think, and I don't know if it's jumping ahead, but maybe it might be worth having a discussion on, we've already kind of started talking about how this would be implemented. Like, will there be an additional architectural review process? And then that we have clearly defined what should be submitted in that package and who reviews it, or is it part of your building permit?
It would be part of the site plan review, and currently we don't have, there's certain sections of the code that we have architectural standards, but they've been pretty relaxed over the years. So this is adding, similar to what we did, most of our architectural standards are in the downtown, which was the most recently adopted part of it. So this is adding the architectural standards to tell the developers and architects, here's what we want to see in the city. It would be reviewed at site plan review, and then of course when building permit comes in, we take a second look at it just to make sure the building permit's consistent with the site plan elevations.
Okay, so site plan review.
I like adding a number 4 that talks about the texture changes, and then maybe even changing B to say you have to use more than one of those instead of just one solely.
I like that you like that because then it validates my comment.
Okay, so is that how we want to do it? Add a number 4 and then say you have to do, maybe use just in combination with other techniques or wall offsets? Because this doesn't say.
It says you can use alone or in combination. I would take out alone and say that they have to do a minimum of 2.
So we just strike the word alone or.
Yeah.
If we want to do, and I suggest that if we just change 1, so if people are still feeling, unless that sentiment has changed, that facade color or materials aren't sufficient, that it has to be applied through reveals or a change in texture, rather than adding number 4, I think you could just add that to 1, or.
Well, they're going to have to do 1 and another one also. They can't just do 1.
Okay, so we're going to leave, in that case, we're going to leave 1 alone.
Unless I'm interpreting it wrong.
This to me clarifies it in the way Jamie put it, that we're just not letting them use colors. And then we're not asking somebody to come back in when they change colors. We're not interested in colors. We're interested in the depth of buildings changing.
Right, so what would be the text that you want of the new number 4?
You're asking me?
Looking at the person who wanted number 4.
Number 4 would be basically what Keith said, that a change in texture materials that would.
That's my comment, so it's. One talks about change in materials.
But 1 says color or material.
Right.
And well, we wouldn't want them to do color and material.
Well, it could just be, would that solve it? Well, I'm not exactly, to be honest, I'm not.
If it
exactly
changes in material, it's not color. It's changes in material, period.
Or, yes, the way it's written now.
I would almost want them to do color and material, so they don't just do color. Because that seems to be one of Jamie's concerns.
Does that address everyone's concerns? We change the or to and. So it requires both rather than just either or.
I'm getting lost on what are we proposing to say?
So I'm trying to figure out wording that works for addresses everybody's concerns. So I think it's a good point. And what's the easiest way to do it? If what happens if we change in 1, say changes in facade color and materials? So that gets to your texture. Do you want to have that language in there about a reveal and texture too?
So, so you're saying change it to changes in facade color and material?
Yeah, that was the suggestion. Does that accomplish what we're looking to do?
I'm not sure I know what that means.
Well,
Changes.
it sounds like, if I heard it right from Jamie, she just didn't want change of color being something used, just changing a color. So if they change the color and material, then it would prevent it from just someone slapping a couple colors of paint on there and saying, look, we've got what we need. Kind of like Maitland City Center's got colors and material changes to offset.
I don't know. I think if you were to put, if you say you have like a stucco facade and then just slapped like, what is it, 10 or 20 feet wide of like clap siding on the same plane, think that looks kind of funky too. There has to be some like relief.
The language that we had before was, or that I thought I heard from Keith and Jamie, is changes of colors, facade materials that follow the same dimensional standards, offset requirements. And it was like shown through a reveal and a change in texture. Sorry. Somebody want to take a stab? I'm open to the suggestions about how we want to change this, I guess.
Well, I guess the reveal and the way we've used them, it's to give, if there is a stucco application and you want to do a change of color, if you had a reveal, it at least gives you a shadow line separation in transition of those colors. But if we're saying that we don't feel like that's enough, so Jamie, are you thinking that it has to be a change in depth?
I think so. Yeah. I don't think it has to be color and material. I think it's the depth.
So maybe it's not or, maybe it's change in color, materials, and depth.
This is still just like, this is still just an alternative to actually providing, because this is a
Yeah.
this is an alternative
to doing that.
Right.
Maybe it should just be stricken. I don't know. Is that bold?
You want to make a note and just come back to it, Barrett?
Yeah, what should the note say? Sorry, I've talked myself around. I
Still
don't
haven't figured out what.
I don't know what we're trying to say. Express through. Well, one suggestion was that we not have just one of these be allowed. So, do folks feel that?
I think Jamie clarified it when she said we don't want to just change the color in order to give them, a forgiveness for having changed our intention was for them to change the depth of the building. Am I saying that right? But
Yeah.
So there would not be any alternative to offsets?
Well, no, there's the 2 and 3.
Okay. So just strike one is kind of what we're back to.
Yeah, strike 1. That would be my suggestion, but I'm open to how others feel.
Well, if
but
that work, if we take that out. So we address the roof lines and columns, but are they just going to assume they can do what they want to with the rest of the face?
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, if these are alternatives to offset and you take out color, then they can just go in there and change the roof lines and put some columns in there, and then they've met their offsets.
Well, that would be true now, even if we left it in one, because it says that
Yeah.
any of these techniques could be used alone in combination.
yeah, because I think what you were saying is they could just change the color. They don't need columns or anything. They could just change color.
Right.
And that's why we were saying you have to use more than one. You can't just use one.
Then maybe, okay. Now I think we've thoroughly confused things.
I'm thoroughly, I mean, I know, I'm not, on one hand, yes, I'm not thoroughly confused, but I'm also, where I'm stuck at is what to change to achieve what we want. I mean, I think I know what we want, but I'm not sure what the edit should be to achieve what the suggestion is.
Well, I would just ask that people take a look at examples, what I'm talking about on buildings with reveals. That I think that's what it gets us closer to what we want. You know, you're gonna have some buildings that they're gonna have some features that are in the same plane. But if you force them to put that reveal, and usually those reveals are, you know, 5/8 or an inch, and it creates a shadow line, it gives you a good sense that there's something drastically has changed there. It's not like you painted and I know what Jamie's talking about, you go in there and on a stucco and you paint this line, you know, and you mask it off and you come back and you paint another color right up to the two. And it's a very, you know, can be a very unappealing look to it, but the reveal does give it a little more character.
You said that the reveal is like an inch?
Yeah, they're typically would be the depth of the stucco, like a 5/8 inch or inch square reveal.
Do you have some specific building examples for us to look at?
Yeah, like an address or.
I can find some.
Okay.
I think in the ALF and Maitland Concourse North, we had them put in like shutters and different architectural elements that made it stick out a little bit different on the areas that they couldn't vary or didn't pop out.
Okay. All right. So yeah, if you don't mind providing us with either an address or a picture or something that we can look at for an example for that, we can ask Clarion to maybe come up with some language. I'll put that on directly on number 1. Okay.
I think I hate to belabor this, but I think there's also other architectural elements that can give depth and detail that don't include offsets. Like if we were to require like window casing, or there's a lot of different ways to achieve an interesting and quality product beyond just this.
Okay, like what do you have some idea, like window? Should we make a little list here?
I mean,
or is that something that you don't want to, or you want to?
I think, why don't we keep going through it, and I'm sure we'll accumulate some more comments as we go.
Okay. Well, I don't think this design center is that much longer, but that's fine. But yeah, if we come back to it and you want to, again, if anybody has some inspiration for other stuff that we've covered and wants to make proposals, you know, feel free. I think that's that would be well received by everybody. Okay, so
Decorative metals.
Decorative metals. Missed this discussion. So we did change something. We had a compromise, and this incorporates this. We discussed this a lot at the downtown standards, and we added the second sentence. Nothing shall limit the use of high quality decorative metal as a building accent material. And that was specifically to accommodate the Porsche dealership example, where they did use high quality decorative metal as a building accent, but trying to prevent the, corrugated metal siding.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but to me, it's not just building accent. I mean, to me, they've used it more as a facade than a accent, and that's what my question was.
And I guess the reason we had it here like this is when council adopted the downtown standards, that actually was discussed, whether it be facades or accents, and they went with the accents because there can be some very, very nice metal facades, and there can be some very, very not nice metal facades.
Right.
And I think that the compromise was let's do it as an accent, allow them as accents, because there's a lot more chance that that's going to look nice.
Okay, I just, again, trying to give Jamie some kudos on some different types of facades.
And ultimately,
And depth.
when we come back to the in-person meeting where you guys are making your recommendations, if that's a P&Z recommendation, then we'll move forward with it. We don't mind putting it in here in the comment, and then when we get to the part where there's an actual recommendation, we can go down the list and say, okay, are we good with this one, that one, whatever. I'm just giving you a historical thing that council voted on the accent part when it was brought to them last time. Not to say that they can't change it.
And that accent material can be interpreted pretty broadly if we need to, right? I think we spent a lot of time on this phrasing because we wanted to accommodate a building like that if we wanted to. So, but.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, so Keith, your next comment was about windows. And I think we had some language in the downtown portion about windows. And I remember discussing it. You want to kind of introduce your comment?
Yes, so that was the one that was on 5-138. Yeah, this one was more how windows are being used. That, we want that promote the day lighting and the other things, but also want to make sure we've got some protection of how that our buildings are using the windows as a feature opportunity, not as a exposed storage, area, or maybe it's an office window that you look up and see the garbage can and everything else sticking out. It's really just having a little bit of control on the aesthetics of what's being viewed from our city streets into those windows.
Yeah, and we have some language in the downtown standards that we might want to consider expanding citywide. And I don't have it pulled up, but I can digitally, but I can read from it and see if this accomplishes kind of what you're thinking.
Okay.
The windows shall not be blacked out or covered with signage, furniture, window treatments, displays, or similar elements, except as provided in the sign section. So in other words, you can't, and I think you could expand that to say storage or some of the other things that you said, but would a phrase like that cover it?
No, because that's not, I don't think that's what I'd rather some I've seen them black it out.
Gotcha. Yeah.
They're just, what they're doing on the other side is not meant to really be viewed. It's just there's a window to a functional space, or it's a storage room.
So windows, so it says the problem is you're saying it's not intended, well, not a problem. The challenge is you're saying not intended for random storage or unkempt use of functional areas. So how do we codify that?
The Publix Plaza, 1792, some of those windows are blacked out of the stuff that faces 1792 because it's back of house, really.
Right.
And one of the ways I've seen it done in other codes is they have a minimum separation distance between the window and any kind of in-store product. So if they can't just put shelving right up against the window and put the display items, they have to actually have like a minimum 5 feet in between. So it actually allows the light come in and allows visual impact. If a police is driving by, he can see what's going on inside without
So if they had a bunch of cardboard boxes and scooted them back a few feet, that'd be okay.
Well, I mean, at some point, there's gonna be something at some distance in front of a window.
Right.
You can't just have a window going through the whole building, so the idea and the intent is to not clutter it up and just block it with storage or supplies or inventory. You wanna have some kind of view and light and everything into the window.
And I like that what Keith has proposed here is just that it's phrased as intent. I mean, we can say that it's intended to do that, but I guess that doesn't really regulate behavior, right?
Yeah, I guess my piece here is that we're creating these venues, and we're creating this walkability, and every business depends on the other business, to draw people and draw more people to their businesses. And if there's these businesses that aren't, for some reason, they're not driven by this, and they're, basically leaving clutter as our walking view of their business, what control do we have over that, or do we have any recourse?
But and let me give you 2 examples. You got Fleet Feet on Independence Lane, who has windows on 2 sides of it. You also have the Publix out parcel on 1792 that has the liquor store, the Chinese restaurant, and whatever else is there. But the Chinese restaurant has windows up against 1792, which is their back of house operations. And I think they either black it out or they have their storage back there because that's the back of the house, but they do have windows along that storefront. So, and I haven't been to Fleet Feet in a little bit, so I don't recall if they have product right up against the window or not.
But it looks nice.
Well, and I guess I'm saying I don't want to black out all the windows, but I don't have a problem. I'd rather them do that than show me all their back of house stuff. I think
Yeah,
that's
Boku
I just
Sushi
think-
place there in Maitland City Center's that way. There's a door right off the elevator there that's, I don't know what anybody thought there, but you're looking at a dirty sink and a bunch of trash inside right through a window.
Hmm.
That's art to somebody.
Not me. But that's my point, is that, to have some kind of control, that we're not letting businesses degrade and negatively impact other businesses around them.
Yeah. We'll see if we can work with Clarion to see how we can do it. If they have to meet a minimum transparency, and I don't know if maybe there isn't a situation where the only way they can meet it is the back of the house operations. Probably not. So we'll take a look and we'll see if we can find something.
It's true. A blacked out window is better than a wall.
We don't allow blacked out windows.
I know, but but I think what I'm hearing is that in some cases that would be preferable to showing the inside of something that's not aesthetic. But, well, I think you're right. I think we can leave it at this for now.
The next one's just that same comment about the 3 feet.
Okay. Right. Okay. Duly noted. So flat roofs.
Mine's been answered.
Oh, it has? Okay.
And Keith, maybe you can help me understand my question about just under what you were saying with the 3 feet. That the cornice treatments that project at least 8 inches outward from the parapet. What do you make that out of? That so it doesn't disintegrate. Or Jamie, maybe you could help me with that, because I don't see what an 8-inch, what would you use that, I mean, is that just gonna be a maintenance? Again, talking about the facade and the upkeep of it and having it look good. Do you see where I'm saying on 6B?
6B, three-dimensional cornice treatments. Well, I mean, that could either be a precast element, or, you know, there's even some economical styrofoam wrapped elements that they're building now that hold up pretty well. I mean, basically, I think it's basically just saying that we're asking for more than just a metal parapet cap. Is that how you guys intended it, Dan, Barrett?
Yes, I think so.
So, I mean, a typical flat roof, you know, that you're not putting any feature on, probably essentially just has a metal cap on top of it, and all you see from the street is maybe a 2 or 3 inch flange of that metal parapet running around the top. And it sounds like we're just requesting for some surface features in above and beyond that cap.
Yeah, because it says it has to project out at least 8 inches.
Yes.
For the architecturally inclined in the group, that seems feasible and reasonable to request. And durable, I guess, is not going to have some unintended outcomes that we need to correct.
I mean, it's not unreasonable to me. I mean, that's you know, it's just basically looking for a horizontal. As I'm interpreted, it's just a horizontal band feature.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if there's an example in any of these images that we have. I haven't seen one yet.
Does that work for you, Kathleen? Does that address your concern, or do you want to see? Would you like to suggest some changing in wording?
No, I'm just trying to figure out how you do that with something that won't. I'm just trying to get the visual on that won't disintegrate. I mean, what do you talk? Like what Keith was saying? Is it a precast? Is it metal? Is it?
Let's assume that there's some building standards that if they're doing that, we don't have to worry about that detail.
Yeah, I mean, I've done them with precast and you know, even just a projecting element that may be a stucco wrap or something that's faux precast. I don't think it's unreasonable.
And yeah, our building official and inspectors are going to, in their review, you know, disallow anything that's going to disintegrate. I would hope. But I'm not personally, you know, positive about how to change that to make that. I'm not sure that we need to change it. But Comment number 26, that was the previous comment. 27.
That's answered.
Glenn, I think that was 127. I don't know. And I think we talked about that. I apologize. That was my typo, or I don't know if that was whose typo that was, but I think we already covered 27.
We did.
Okay. 28. We're on page 139. So this is in regards to large retail establishments. And yeah, I mean, we do allow, or we do in the comp plan, that the only part of the comp plan that prohibits big box retail was Maitland Concourse North in that comp plan amendment.
So none allowed in Maitland Concourse North.
Right.
Personal storage was a big box retail called Service Merchandise back in the day, and it was the storage place bought it and converted it.
Yep. But do we allow, so we do allow over 50,000 square feet anywhere else in the area?
Yeah, in our use table, if we were to refer back to module 1, I do not have that pulled up electronically, but let's see here. That's Article 4. Retail sales. Consumer goods establishments. Yes, permitted in the west side and downtown. Or as a part of a PD.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem. And right, if it's already established as a PD or anywhere else, it's going to be the design standards. It's going to be legal non-conforming. So
It's going to be what? Say that again, please.
legal non-conforming use. It's not going to be. But the reason why downtown is specifically accepted is because they have more strict design standards. So the design standards of downtown would apply as opposed to this.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, Keith, I think I understand this question is that you're.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is similar. I thought when we were talking about that other, I was having a deja vu moment because I thought I'd addressed similar to what Jamie said. So yeah, this one, I was drawing out that similar thing is that we're giving them an option of 2. And with that 2, they could basically build a flat, no projecting building with only changes in parapet heights.
Well, I'm reading 3. So but I think your point still stands. So if you're saying,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the, did I jump? Where am I at?
am I in the wrong spot?
No, you're good.
You had 2A, 1, and 3. Wait, am I in the wrong spot? Yeah, I think I am. I'm sorry. Hold on. Here. Oh, you're right. Okay, gotcha. Nope, I stand
Oh,
corrected.
yeah.
Here we are. So 1, yeah.
So I think we need to tie this language together with whatever we come up. So I would just make a note to connect with that other one. So I think whatever we do, we need to describe the service, but I almost think we need to ask for 3.
I agree with you, Keith.
Because I think even if we tweak this language, we still don't want that to be the primary way you address the building. So I think you really need to have 3, pick 3.
Okay. Yeah, so I also made a note to, tie back and make consistent with the previous facade section. So if there's some common terminology.
How about Barrett, adding the thought of having them pick 3 of these?
Yeah, and we should ask for 3. I have that.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Required 3, sorry.
I didn't see your comment. Got it.
Yep. No, I think I heard consent. I heard general agreement with that.
Okay.
All right, unless anybody has anything else, I think that moves us into the sustainable development standards. First question is, this does apply to all building types and areas of the city, including single family residential.
Okay, so it does. Okay.
And Glenn, similar with the applicability, unless I misunderstood your comment, this does exempt PDs that were already approved prior to the adoption of this LDC.
I think my question was because it said you had a date, an open date in there. So anything existing prior to a certain date. And I didn't know if we could put that date in and all of a sudden make PDs, if it was different than any of these codes, non-conforming.
Well, the intent is that this date is going to be whenever council adopts this code. So if they make it in before this code's adopted, they're exempted from this.
I got you.
Okay. Yeah. We're not picking, if we were to backdate it, that could definitely create a problem, but that's not the intent. (143), several people talked about wanting a definition of cool roofs. That's easy. I mean, the cool roof definition is from, I think the EPA has that. It's just using materials that reflect sunlight. So.
Yeah, I mean, I understood it, but it's a question, should we define it or reference?
I think so. I think we define a lot more trivial things and something we refer to like several times. So I think that's an easy fix.
We can take out the light duty pickup and put in the cool roof.
Right. Light duty pickups. I'm sure I'm gonna find why that's in there. I'm sure. And the chickie, right? The special Native American structure that does not require a building permit.
I've been running all over the city trying to find that chickie.
Just so wait, hang on before you go past cool roof. What kind of materials, again, because I just don't know, what kind of materials are you referring to that reflect the sun? You're talking about an actual roof, or are you talking about
like an EPDM can be white. I think that's when it's white instead of black. Black absorbs the heat.
I'm thinking of like a radiant barrier, but that's on the inside, not on the outside.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the lighter color roof material, unless Barrett or you guys know of another example, but I think that's what most of them are.
Yeah, it's lighter color and material too, I think.
Yeah.
The other thing. And I'm an expert because I Googled it 30 minutes ago. But that's what I recall seeing on the EPA's website, the definition of cool roof.
But I can tell you by experience, being in the high Mojave Desert on a building with a cool roof, it's still not cool.
So you're
Right.
just saying, you could easily say, so like it's a shingle, but it's a light gray versus a black shingle? Because if you're to if this is for all building types in the city, that includes residential, from
Yeah,
what
but
he
I
said.
think, I think by definition, there's a certain rating or something. So I think it's more than just the color. There's, and I can't remember the specifics, but there's something that gives it some kind of reflective that it's not generating or absorbing heat.
Yeah.
Is there any,
Sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Is there any issue with those creating like a glare?
Not, no, I don't think so. I mean, most when I put them are on, have been near flight paths and stuff, and that hasn't been an issue.
Okay. Just curious.
So this other question was about this ASHRAE standards for lighting. That footnote, that's like a funky footnote, but that's supposed to be footnote 729. And all that is American Society of Heating and Refrigerating Air Conditioning Engineers.
Oh, okay, I see. But do you understand what I'm saying? If we use that, adopt that, you know, so we adopt it in 2021 and then they change the standards in 2022, then is that changing everything that is in our code? Or we just, you know, because then you're moving the goalposts every time they change their standards.
Well, correct. And that's, I mean, I think that's probably true for a lot of these things, like Energy Star standards are probably updated semi-regularly. And yeah, it's just what at the time that they make the building permit, right? That's the standards we'll use. And that's why we're not referring to a specific edition or a particular year, because to get these points, they're gonna have to meet whatever standards are in place at the time that they apply. But that being said, I mean, I think these kind of technical things, we're gonna need to review them every 7 years or so, just to make sure that they're not completely irrelevant or outdated, because this kind of sustainability technology really changes a lot, right? I mean, this is not something we're gonna set once and forget about it, and they're gonna stay the same for 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I know, like in our mobility fee section, I think it's required that they go back and redo the calculations, redo a new study every 7 years. I don't think we want to do something like that, be that prescriptive, but it would be a good idea. I mean, I think we're going to hear a demand for that. If these start becoming irrelevant, then we'll need to go back into this code and update this periodically. This is not something that we're going to set and leave for 30 years. Just don't see it happening.
Hey, Barrett, quick question.
Yeah.
Back on it's still on my brain, the PD. Why would any reference to a PD, like, doesn't that supersede any of these zoning and regulations? Like a PD is its own zoning. And so I forget the intention of the statement, but doesn't a PD by itself stand alone?
It would, I guess, if it's silent on the topic, and then they would come in and update it, or for a minor change. I think that's probably the reason why it's specifically excluded, because if they were adopted prior to this being code, they wouldn't even discuss the sustainability standards.
No, but or post this code too, because PD by itself.
Post this code, they would have to come in and specifically ask to not follow it, right? They would need to say, I need a waiver from this portion of the code. Not that, in other words, if you come in for a plan development and you want to be exempt from certain portions of the code, you have to put that in your application.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I got it.
Whereas the ones previous to this wouldn't, because this is a new section. Several people had questions about removing lawn and turf in Maitland. I think this is gonna be an interesting discussion.
Not good for the environment.
What, lawn and turf is not good for the environment?
Correct. It's fertilized, it's run out, it actually doesn't absorb as much as people think. It, yeah, meaning having it's not necessarily great. But
Well, I guess what I'm trying to understand is that are we encouraging residentials to just cover their whole yard in mulch?
Yeah, probably not. Plant material, doing like a Florida-friendly landscaping with habitat and incorporating mulch into that in place of turf.
But that's not what it says. It
I
says
know,
existing plant material or mulch. So if I read this and I wanted mulch, that's all I need to put down. And
Yeah,
you'll give me a point and a half.
I would. How should it be phrased instead? Plant material with
I
mulch?
think what you're wanting here is you're almost wanting, and I don't know if this is the current term, but you're encouraging a zero-scape type environment to Glenn's point, something that's more favorable for the environment.
But if somebody comes in and just puts down a bunch of mulch, can they say they're zero scaping? I mean, if it's, we want to encourage it, but I guess what from a code perspective.
And see, I'm afraid somebody's gonna plant a garden in the front yard because they can.
And I think that's precisely what this is intended to encourage, right? And I don't know that we can prevent them from gardening in their front yard.
The city
You
of
don't have
Orlando
to-
did a whole thing on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we can. I think the concern about it just laying down a bunch of mulch and calling it good and us giving them 1.5 credits. I hear that and I like to address that. I'm just trying to think of.
Well, I think you want to write it in such a way that you're going to give them a point and a half because they're planting things there that are better for the environment. And that's your focus. Now, mulch could be a component of it, but I wouldn't state that. And I would have it as something that is reviewed, by our, whoever reviews landscape type things.
Sure. I think we can, we don't want to, we can't get into too much detail on all in this part, but I agree with trying to rephrase it so it doesn't highlight the mulch component.
Well, and I think the rephrasing is needed. Because remove all lawn or turf kind of scares me. I just don't want to have somebody have like corn stalks in their front yard.
What about a butterfly garden? You'd be more comfortable with butterflies rather than corn. No, but
I would look,
right? Like for bees and.
Yeah. Could we have our consultant look at some of the language around the zero-scape idea and see how it's worded in there? Because I agree, you could just take out remove lawn and take out mulch and just basically you're writing something to encourage them, to provide something that by definition is plant life that will sustain itself without a lot of water. When I say a lot of water, a lot of sprinkler.
Okay.
Does ground up tires count as mulch?
Maybe it's not lawn or turf. No, but artificial surfaces don't count towards landscape requirements. I don't know about here. Right, because if you have it around low water usage, then it kind of by definition excludes lawn or turf. Okay, fair enough. I think that captures it, hopefully. Right, the next thing was LEED certification.
Yeah, this one troubled me a bit. You know, if we have somebody that gets lead silver, lead gold, or lead platinum, we should applaud them. But here we're making them do that plus get some other points. To me, that's the home run area if you get there, because getting lead silver, lead gold, and lead platinum, some of that does tie with quality, water conservation, quality, and transportation standards. So I think the consultant needs to relook at this. To me, if you hit those three, you shouldn't ask them to do anything else.
That's what I was going to ask for anybody that has more knowledge about the LEED certification process. Is it a true statement to say that if you've obtained the LEED silver or above, you've kind of by definition done many of the things on this list? Or
Yes. Yeah.
If that's the case, then I think you're right. I mean, if we're going to say silver or above gets you all the points you need.
Yeah, because I think lead silver for like we do a lot of buildings for the federal government, and there was for a time that a lot of our buildings have to be lead silver or minimum lead silver. And so that requires a multi-point system, you know, hitting all kinds of things. And if we have lead platinum buildings in Maitland, that's something to brag about.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's an excellent question.
I would even have them check have them check the bronze, but I think silver might want to be the line.
But maybe up bronze.
Yeah,
from 1 point.
Yeah.
Yeah, just have them check that there might be more of a value point to bronze than give just one.
Okay.
And you follow what I'm saying is we basically said you got to get 5 points of this stuff. And
Right. Yeah. No, I it seems a little underbound for sure. The next quick comment 37 was down here. I mean, that's the failure to install. I mean, we catch that at the building permit level, the inspection level, but failure to maintain, you know, that's just going to be code enforcement like anything else. And this just clarifies that they're required to do this. So if they fail to maintain it, then it's a violation.
but are we set to enforce this? Or is it just,
I mean, yeah, no, not unless somebody complained. It's not like something we're going to go inspect every year. So we are dependent upon somebody reporting that these systems are not, like their EV things are not functioning, and it would require somebody to report it. So I get that that's kind of a vulnerability, but I don't know how to, I'm not sure how to address it. Other than to clarify that it's a violation of the city code. Does that work for you, Keith? I know that's an imperfect answer, but.
I mean, I guess it's the honest answer, but
Yeah.
But then why do we do it if we're not going to enforce it?
Well, we are saying we're going to enforce it. I mean, we just don't have a mechanism to inspect it, right? I mean, we're going to inspect it when it's built, but I personally still think it's valuable to, I mean, certain things like skylights or central air conditioners. I mean, you're saying if somebody, the question is, how are we going to measure this and track it indefinitely? You know, I mean, there's a certain amount. It's kind of on the property owner. I mean, I guess the intent is we're telling them, the property owner, if you've gotten these sustainable development features approved, then it's your responsibility to keep them maintained. And if you don't, not only is it might not be a violation of the property maintenance code, but it's going to be a violation of the land development code because your building is required to have these.
but you're
I think there's
saying,
still value in having it in the code, even if we're not inspecting it annually.
but you're saying at least if and I don't even know what this would look like if somebody, said, hey, you might want to go look at this. And, I don't know that they're really doing these things that the city has given them credit for.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we would have the right to require that they do it, or they would face fines.
Well, I guess they're really not getting, they're not necessarily getting anything special more than that first installation, right?
Well, these are requirements, right? Because this is, yes, they're having, what they're getting special is they're getting their project approved. And we're saying that it's not enough just to do it to get it approved, but you also have to maintain these in perpetuity.
Okay.
So if they come in and we're like, oh, check out our vehicle charging stations and our dual activated flushing toilets. And 10 years later, we come in and these are all broken and the toilets have all been swapped out. We can say, hang on, wait a minute. Where are your sustainable development standards? Like, where are these features that you said you were going to have? So this just clarifies that that's something that they don't have to just have on day one. It's just something that they have to, well, they have to have it on day one, and they also have to have it in perpetuity.
No, I get it. I think the purpose of having this in there is that you want, Maitland wants to, encourage these things and have people understand that these things are important. There just becomes so much you can do about, it's not, unless you want to add resources like the fire department to go in and check all this stuff, then the best you can do is try to install the intent in people's mind.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe that is something that could be done as part of their annual inspection. Maybe someday in the future have a little checklist, but if at least the least we can do is codify it so that we can figure out that puzzle of how to enforce it later. And then,
So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were.
No, you're fine.
So under applicability, it says all development shall comply with the standards of this section.
Mhm.
Now, do you mean all future, existing and future development, or all new development? Because if we're talking about all new, therefore future development, then I don't see why you can't condition C of C on meeting these requirements. Why can't some of these things be done at the inspection level?
They are.
And maintenance would rely on code enforcement.
Yep. You nailed it. That's exactly how you do it.
So will it apply to existing buildings
No, only if when they expand it or alter it. Only if they meet this, only if they meet this criteria. All development, unless exempted, shall comply.
Okay.
Next question was about the purpose statement. 147. Comment 38. You just want, Kelly, we're just not clear about what that was or whether it should be included.
Not clear on, not understanding how that universal design is tied in with all of that, sustainable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Is it just?
It's almost too vague.
If you were asking me how it connects, I would say because it allows people to age in place or stay in place based on a number of circumstances that could befall them due to their health, that would alleviate the need for separate assisted living facilities or living with the resources that are associated with that. That's not too much of a reach. Do you think it's too much of a reach?
I do.
What does everybody else think?
It's just sort of a mission statement in my mind at that point.
Yeah, it seems like something that's easy to achieve that is maybe has the cost to implement versus the reward is a bigger margin than some of the other things on the list.
Okay.
Then I had a big, in the submitted comments, I had a big gap after this. So let me know if anybody has any further questions about these comments. Other than that, we didn't have anything until we got to signs. Your comment 39. What was your thought about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I saw billboard referred to a few times, and I know what we all think of as billboard, but I was just wondering, therefore, is that a universal definition? We understand what we mean by that, or does billboard start to become a billboard over a specific height, size?
Shall we look at the definition and see what it says? A freestanding off-site sign or sign structure. So that doesn't define it by, this carries forward the existing definition. So it doesn't talk about size. Theoretically, you have a really mini billboard. Does that work for you?
If it works for everybody else, there was some controversy in the last election that there were some big signs that went up on people's property, and is that a standalone sign? You know, and I'm fine with that. I didn't go down and reference the definition, so
Okay.
I'm good if everybody's good.
Yeah, we got into a little bit of sign revision elsewhere. What we tried to do with the sign section is to simplify it pretty significantly from what's existing, and pretty much fit everything into a table. Well, first we list what's prohibited, and then we list general standards. But a lot of it is in that table of what's allowed where.
Right, you had just scrolled to something that had like a figure, an illustration of a billboard. Was that in the definition section?
Yes.
Okay. So is the conclusion of this comment to define a billboard in the definitions a little further?
It would people, I asked Glenn if he thought it needed more, and he said he was okay, but if other people would like to see more definitions, this is just, again, this has served us this way so far, but
our political signs, are they defined in a different section?
yeah, we have, if you go here, we have a lot of definitions in the sign section. So here we define what a sign is. And we did go in and amend the political and temporary signs. What I think they're not called political signs anymore. I believe they're called free expression signs. Here we go. A sign that communicates information or views of concern of the owner of the sign or contains any other non-commercial message that is otherwise lawful. And there's been a lot of court free speech rulings that the city has to comply with around this. And so a lot of the wording is, if it seems very specific, it is based on court decisions. But do we want, but going back to billboard, do we want, so that should probably.
Yeah, it answers it for me. If everybody else, I mean, I wasn't, it just jumped out at me, and I didn't have Kathleen's attention to detail qualities and shoot down there to the definition, so I'm good.
Okay, everybody else is too. Shoot, sorry. The next one was about mobile billboards on page 157.
Yeah, under S, it talks about the mobile billboard signs being parked for more than 24 consecutive hours.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you go to the 159, page 159, then it says under permitted signs A to B,
And then A to B, and then it says, except for mobile billboard signs that are prohibited under the section.
so, oh, sorry, is that? Okay, never mind. I think I just answered it because it's prohibited and then it still says it's prohibited. Okay, sorry. Figured it out. Thank you.
No problem. All right, then we have several comments on this table. So floor is open.
Yeah, so I had, I think I figured it out later, but the projecting arm sign, is that one like it's a sign that's setting perpendicular off the face of a building? Is that what that means?
Now, these are real estate signs. So these are going to be ones that are
You got the
post.
graphic.
Yeah, right. Those are ones that are in the lawn that have the arm sticking out with the board hanging from it. Because our sign type is a real estate sign.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm with you.
Yep.
All right.
So this is kind of by definition, don't require a permit. You can just go out. These are all things that don't require a permit.
Okay, all right. So the other part of this, I had a few specific things about so right there on the open house, I don't know why we jumped to months. I don't know why we don't just say 90 days. We reference days all throughout this.
Right. So this is, I think it's supposed to say you can have it 3 days out of a month.
And that's how I read it. But if you start limiting that, that's restraint of trade. I don't think you want to go there.
Well, I guess either way, we need to clarify because that didn't read. I didn't read 3 days out of a month. I see it now. You show it, but
How did you read it? 3 months out of.
yeah, yeah, that's how I read it. I guess I didn't put as much weight as I should have on that slash.
Oh, no, it's okay. That's the cell is blank, signs are not required to be removed. So this is saying you can have it up for 3 days and then you have to take it down. Oh,
But see, I look at it as somebody goes out there, Saturday, Sunday, and then they go out there. If the house hasn't sold, they're out there Saturday, Sunday. I know people who do open houses every weekend on properties. I don't.
you have open house signs.
And they go up for the open house and they come down. I mean, you're not leaving them up, 24/7. It's just the way the way that's worded. I don't think you want to go there.
So if we just had it, if we just got rid of the word month and just said that it could be up for 3 days, but then as soon as they were down, they could come back up for.
I don't know that. Typically you don't see people putting them up for 3 days in a row. Usually it's open house, Saturday for 3 hours, Sunday for 3 hours. The signs go up, the signs come down.
Right.
They usually stay up for any length of time when that's not. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I think I would just fix it to say, I think this is saying that you can 3 days out of a month. But if we just got rid of it, says 3 days, the same way you can have a garage sale is limited. I don't know that it hurts us to say that there's not any limit in the frequency that you can have it, right? If we just say the duration is 3 days.
I like that because then to Kathleen's comment, the likelihood is it'll only be up 1 day at a time, but we're not saying you can only do it 3 times in a month.
Okay.
So the other piece that I had on this comment was under the height for open house and real estate, we say 3 or 6, and then we go into better defining it. In the notes. So why don't we just say C note?
Does that make more sense to people, or would you rather be able to see 3, 6 at a glance?
I agree with Keith.
Okay. That would be here and here.
Yes. And then I had another one down at the bottom of the page. So down on the on-site construction sign, I would put under duration days, C note.
Gotcha, because that note refers to the sign.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. All right, so we addressed 42 and 41. 43 is next. Comment was about freestanding multi-tenant.
Yeah, I just thought 12 feet was awfully high. Am I missing something?
Other than it's multi-tenant, so you're going to have a lot of more text on it, one for each. Thinking of like the shops at Maitland, or the shops, yes, of Maitland on 1792. So a lot of times they're facing kind of a higher speed roadway, and they have lots of tenants. So that's generally why they're 12. But if you think of that going 1792, just south of Wells Fargo, that kind of tall monument sign for the shops there that have, I guess, what, a dozen or so tenants. Because that's, I guess, why it's 12 feet. It has to accommodate a higher number.
I don't know, that just seems high. After we did when we did the signs before, I actually drove around and looked at, like Home Depot signs and whatnot, and they were only like 8 feet high. 12 seems very high.
Well, that would be 8 feet, right? Remember, you're dealing only with a single tenant in Home Depot. So they would be 8. These are your shopping centers that they have to fit all of their tenants on the sign. And that's why we give them more sign area and more height to accommodate that. But if you want, we can have a look at it. I think that's what it is now. So that if you reduced it, you may create quite a few non-conforming signs. What do folks think?
I mean, I've seen bigger. I mean, there's a lot of those out on 430, 436. There's a few big multi-tenant development that they probably have 3 of those that size.
Right.
outside of 436, never hoping to be our standard. I would assume there's other things about 12 feet not being higher than the building itself. So if a multi-tenant, I understand what you're saying, in Vaughn Plaza, right at Lake Avenue, another building that I think there's so many tenants in there.
Oh, shoot, Glenn, I think we lost your audio. Unless I lost everybody's audio.
Still here.
Okay. Can you try again, Glenn?
Yeah, it said my internet was unstable. So I guess I was saying that I don't know what the right height is. So 12 feet, this is only talking about larger properties with multi-tenants. So maybe if it's referenced somewhere that 12 feet was never higher than the building itself. And Vaughn Plaza is the single story building I could think of with a lot of tenants, and a sign that's bigger than the building, taller than the building itself, maybe. But if it's not 12 feet, these are big buildings, like you said, with multiple tenants. What's okay? Is it 10? Is it 9? What's our reference?
Well, and to your point, Glenn, do we want to be like 436? This is the city of Maitland.
Right. No, never. I don't think ever. That's not our model.
Right. Nor should it be, but I mean, this is what we're trying to, I think, again, I don't want to caution against creating a bunch of non-conforming signs, right? If we were to all of a sudden drop this down to 10, we'd find a bunch of, pretty much, I think you'll find almost many of our multi-tenant buildings have built at 12 feet, because I think that's been the standard for a while. And if you were to drop it down, you create a bunch of, they would find that they couldn't replace their signs.
So is this true?
What about Glenn, Kathleen? What about Glenn's suggestion of not exceeding the height of the building? Does that give you some?
12 feet. 12.
Sorry, what? Pardon?
Hang on, I was thinking this through.
Okay.
Because if you say shall not exceed the height of the building, and we're pushing for higher buildings, are we allowing them to put higher signs in that?
Oh, but not to exceed 12 feet.
Not to exceed 12 feet still.
Okay. Yes, then yes, I'm good with what Glenn said.
Because even the Maitland Center, if you think about a lot of the office buildings with multi-tenants.
I guess when you're driving, it just doesn't look that big.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing there. 12 feet when you're 40 feet away from the edge of the roadway. I mean, you want to be able to make the sign large enough that they can see the tenants' names and signage on there.
All right, does that work for everybody?
Yeah, I think one question on there on what I would have along that same thinking is, I mean, really with the way we've evolved, I mean, is a big sign for a multi-tenant really the way you find what you're looking for? Or have you not Google searched it and mapped it out? I mean, is this an impulse?
True. People, I think maybe I totally.
How many tenants don't have a sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to want to have a sign still. They're going to be concerned about their visibility and getting their name out there. Yeah, I think I don't think anybody's arguing that we should increase it from 12 feet, but I think the main argument for not decreasing it too much is just creating a bunch of non-conforming signs that people aren't going to be able to replace. And, but if this, I think this is a good a good nuance that might keep things from being out of character.
And maybe signs will be part of our test fit exercise, that we can get a sense too of if things are in fact kind of out of character.
Sure. Yeah,
Good point.
absolutely. All right. Next one is on the following page. And I think this is just a misunderstanding because this is a temporary event sign. So it's not for like the venue. This would be like the block party that Maitland throws or something like that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So that's why it's no more than 30 consecutive days. All right. Next comment, number 45, page 166. Aha, this is about removal. You want to introduce this one?
Is that mine?
Yeah.
Well, I think I had two on that, and I may have missed the one. So going back to the banner, the at the top of the page, the banner sign.
Oh, okay.
The temporary banners permitted for no more than 45 days. So the banner signs around like the memory care that's going in as part of off of Sandspur and Maitland Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
All those banner signs that are on the fencing there, is that like what we're talking about? Because that's been there for more than 45 days. And I mean, I know this is the new code, but do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes. I'm not positive I have the answers. There's two aspects to that. Is one that there might not be some things that are considered signs, and then other things by definitions are like life scenes or images. I'm not positive about the content of the signs you're talking about, but by definition, some of them, if they're pictures of, if they don't meet the definition of a sign and they're pictures of people in what we call a life scene, then they're not considered a banner sign. If they have words on it that are communicating information about business, then they are a banner sign, and they probably shouldn't be up for more than 45 days. I don't know if those are. I mean, I take your word for it. There might be those might not be in compliance.
But this states that from the initial business tax receipt or CO. And so those are all under construction banners.
Oh, those might fall under construction signs, which I think are in a different category, right?
Well, that's another part of the question then.
Yeah, you're right. I think so. You have, sorry, scroll way back up here. I think
You just passed it.
I missed it. Sorry.
It's at the bottom of this table.
Yeah, I think those would fall under on-strike construction signs. And whether that's, I think the signs you're talking about are greater than 6 feet. So that might be the concern there.
Well, I mean, again, it goes to what do we want to see in the city of Maitland? Do we want to allow that?
I mean, I will say the banners that you're referencing are on the fence, and they're sort of a screening to the construction site itself. So do you want to see the construction site? And these are the ones you're referencing. I don't know if there are better examples, but in the case of Maitland Boulevard, it's hiding a construction site.
Right, but I mean, it's what do, and I agree with what you're saying, but what do we want to see? Or what do we want to allow? Because is it not allowed, or is it allowed the way this is written? And that's, you know, and if you think of future construction sites, and I know that seems to be more of the trend now is to have just what you were saying, Barrett, those lifestyle kind of pictures and whatnot. Because if you think of where they tore down, Glenn, help me out, the old hotel down the street, across the street from, down 1792, across the street from Burger King.
Oh, that's going to become the strip
Yes.
center. Yeah,
Yes.
perfect example. Yep.
Yes.
Hill
So,
Park.
and that's just renderings of the building, of what, you know, what is supposed to be going in there, or a rendering. So again, help me with the definition, Glenn.
Well, again, so to me, those are fence oriented, hiding something that probably looks worse without any screening, you know. So when JCC redid their parking lot, or they used to have their tennis courts, they just had green screening there with the construction that they had behind the fence. I mean, I don't know. The banners don't bother me with some information about what's coming, and at the same time the dual purpose of hiding the construction, which is also a safety issue.
Correct. Kind of like the black screening.
We get into trouble because we can't really regulate content. That's what the Supreme Court is pretty clear about. So we can't say, oh yeah, you can have a sign, but it only has to be about the building that's coming. You know what I'm saying? That's where it becomes tricky from a legal standpoint. And we can play with it. I think we can play with these numbers, right? If you're talking about changing, like if you want to allow more construction signage than 6 square feet, which is, I mean, I think this is just purely informational, right? Like that's like those little tiny 2x3 signs. That's like this construction company is doing this here. If we want to allow for more, that's something that we could definitely consider. If we want to, yeah, because I think where you get in trouble is, Glenn's right, if you can't really distinguish between a green screen or a screen with a picture on it, where by definition it becomes a sign when it starts to have information or advertisement about the property.
But Glenn, do you think what I hear you saying is wouldn't you want to encourage more of that lifestyle rendering kind of thing as a construction screen around it versus?
I mean, I think maybe it's a business decision. It's a good idea because somebody's trying to self-promote. And if they don't do it, you know, they might. And I don't know that we have to regulate the distinctions between which signs, if assuming the banners are okay, the screening's okay. I mean, I think it's a good point, but personally, I'm okay with what's here.
I guess my definition of a banner was just, I guess I'm just looking at it differently. Okay. And then the next one the question I had underneath that is under the removal under general. Mm-hmm. It talks about the sign owner, the owner of the property on which the sign is placed, and the sign contractor shall each be held responsible for adherence to this section and any other applicable laws or regulation. And more than likely, and I know a lease a lot of times tends to take care of this, but a lot of times the property owner doesn't necessarily know what the tenant has placed out there. And I didn't know if there was any language that I guess then that's the sign owner, correct? Would that be one and the
Probably
same?
would be the tenant, right?
Okay, then I'm good.
Okay. Right, moving on to building numbering and street naming. So I think this was the one that you had to comment on, comment number 46.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure I understood what the intent of this is. I mean, it's talking about existing installations. So does this mean that if somehow something slipped by the city and they put something non-conforming up related to numbers or whatever, that the city could come notify them that they need to get themselves into compliance? Is that what this means?
I think this is I think it's broader than that. I mean, it would also include, this is existing buildings, right? This is basically saying, this doesn't apply to new construction. This applies to everybody in the city. However, you know, because this is this safety, right? This is like, the purpose of this is for emergency services to be able to find where the emergency is. And so we're asking them that it's on this visibility from the street, and that's clearly visible in the front and the back of the building. And then basically we're saying, if you have an existing, if you meet the spirit of this, then you don't have to meet the exact letter of this. Like if you, including like if your number's prominently displayed on your mailbox, not on the front of your building, then you're granted approval without alteration. That's all you're saying. This isn't necessarily trying to be for, this isn't really the same as a legal non-conformities, I would say. I think that's the intent of that.
But so I guess what I'm also, if we told them, if we approved whatever they have 10 years ago, have we changed our mind now and said, well, no, we've got a new code and we need to get you need to conform?
Yeah, I think so, but I don't think this is changing anything. I think this carries forward what we've got, and it just has minor like wording changes. So there's not any big changes in this new code update. So I want to say that this language is probably already in there. I'm not positive. I have to check.
Okay.
But yeah, if in the future, if it was to change, then this would basically say that existing buildings have to come into compliance. That's the idea. I believe your next comment was here.
Yeah, so I was just, it's basically saying the fire department shall be responsible for the assignment of numbers to suites, units, and apartments. So if I'm designing this, am I not putting the numbers on and the fire department is approving them?
They are.
But they're not, I mean, I don't call the fire department and say, hey, could you pick out my numbers for me?
And actually, I think the post office does that.
See, I thought it was the building department.
I think a post office assigns addresses.
No, I think it's the fire department.
It's
I thought it
typically like the emergency services, because it all has to go into the like the emergency service response, like in GIS, so that they can get it all cleared. But some like bigger municipalities have like a specific addressing person within like public works.
Right, I guess where I was going was like the suites and the units and like apartment number one, apartment number two. I mean, do they pick out all that, or does the designer say, okay, I'm getting the basic address and now I'm going to show you what I'm proposing, and then they confirm it?
Precisely. They're reviewing it, and if you're the designer, provide something real wacky, like system of assigning numbers, they're gonna say, no, I want you to do it a different way, because ultimately, you know, the EMS folks have to find where the person's having an emergency. But you're right. I think we can clarify that the designer, the fire FD reviews proposed.
I don't know that you need to change it now that I read it closer and talking this out. It's just basically saying they're responsible for the assignment.
They are. You know, it's kind of, it made me think of it, you know, the old, you know, not putting a 13th floor on a building or something like that, or not having a unit 13. Do people still do that? I mean, do they skip certain numbers?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I guess the fire department says whether that's allowed or not. But, okay, so if we're cool with that language, we can leave it.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. So as a facilitator, I just want to check in on time. I assume everybody, as is traditional, we're gonna okay with wrapping up in about 14 minutes.
Works for me. Is there any old business stuff that we need to stop earlier to deal with?
I have one item, so maybe it might make sense to try to, let's see, are we at a good stopping point? I did bad facilitation. I didn't even see if we were.
Yeah, we're about to start a whole new section. So that's actually a pretty good stopping point.
Okay, did we have anything else on this section before we got to? Oh, goodness. Do we have any other comments on Article 5? Yeah.
Nope, not according to the document.
Fantastic. Well, that's excellent timing. So I would, if it's okay with everybody, should we stop here and then to kind of use the remaining time to discuss next steps and upcoming meetings?
Sounds good to me.
And then let us out early. I mean, are you sure?
Everybody got out early last time, if we remember correctly. But okay, so we have a community meeting coming up. Are folks available in 2 weeks, which I guess would be sorry, let me open my calendar, would be the third Thursday of the month, which would be the 18th, for an in-person meeting, to have a community meeting on that date, or would be to have the in-person community meeting on the 1st.
I mean, I have the 18th on my calendar already.
Yeah, I'm good for the 18th.
Me too.
There's a possibility I may be out of town. It's our spring break, but we don't have final plans yet, but I'll try to coordinate around it. Barrett.
Okay. Well, we'd love to have everybody there, but at least we have a quorum, it sounds like. So that's all the information. Thank you for finding that. We don't need to make a final decision tonight, but we'll let that take that into consideration and kind of look at the applicant's time into and see which one makes sense. But that is I just want to make sure to see if that was a possibility to do it on the 18th.
Barrett, can you share what the item would be, and maybe that Matt and the rest of us say, oh, we'd rather have everybody there, or?
Yes, we could. It's the Maitland Fitness for Uptown Maitland Lot 2. They would be the proposed Maitland. I don't know if it was on City Council's agenda prior. I don't know if are people familiar with this project. This would be the community meeting where this is the first time you're all hearing it before staff has reviewed it, style meeting.
I'm only familiar with it because I just happened to be at the Monday's meeting.
It's a site plan review that involves a couple waivers, 1 or 2 waivers that Planning and Zoning Commission would be responsible for granting. But this would be something, the site plan review, because it involves waivers in downtown Maitland, Planning and Zoning would get the final approval of this. So this would be the first community meeting, and then you would have the decision meeting later. Does that change your thoughts at all? Okay, well, we, like I said, we just thank you for that feedback. We'll consult with Dan and the applicant and kind of decide how we want to do that, but that's a possibility. Regardless, we're gonna have definitely either a workshop or an in-person meeting on the 18th to either go over either the community meeting and continue going over the land development code. I think it's safe to say that we can cover, famous last words, but the rest of the subdivision section, Article 6 and Article 7 next time, and to get started on hopefully Module 2B. Did everybody get a chance to download that already?
Yeah.
Okay. There's only about 30 pages left in Module 1. So do you want to set a goal for reviewing 2B? Article 2 is pretty beefy, so we could just say the first 40 pages. Does that sound about right? Warm, too cold, too much, too little?
First 40 pages of Module 2B is what you're saying?
Yeah, I just picked that out of the hat just as a starting point for negotiation.
That makes sense.
Does that sound good to folks?
Works for me.
We could do, how about to page 237, which is the general zone district mapping.
All right.
So again, that worked out great. If you guys want to send written comments to me like last time, that's I think that's working well. And like I said, get them to me as soon as possible. If you get them to me at the last minute, I just get them. I can turn them around to you and get them to you when I get them. So.
Barrett, are you saying that with this item and in person, we'll have time to get through this so that our goal is to get it before the meeting in 2 weeks?
Yes, I think so. Only, and I say that because it's not certain when that meeting is going to, if that's going to be on the 18th or not. So we'll either have a Zoom workshop or we'll have a community meeting plus some time afterwards, like last time. And not knowing how long the community meeting will last, we still might have a good several hours after that to review. So I don't think that's why one of the reasons I wasn't being overly ambitious, but this is a suggestion. So that being the case, that still work for everybody?
Yes.
All right, excellent. That's all I have for the evening. Does anybody else have any items that they'd like to discuss? Any feedback, thoughts, things we should be doing differently?
Now, I do have a question, and maybe I just need to go back through my emails. Did you send something with a download of the 2B?
Yes, I did send out a link. It was a few days after our last workshop.
Okay, if it's in an email, I can find it.
Would anybody else like me to resend it tomorrow morning?
No, I can find it for me.
I got it.
Okay. Okay, if anybody else wants any issue, then you just feel free to email me if you need to find it or anything else. That works for me. If anybody, like I said, thoughts, people have moments of inspiration or things that they want to make sure they include, brainstorms, write them in an email. You can send them to me. I'll collect them and collate them and we can go over them. So don't feel like what's if we passed something that ship sailed and we can't bring it up again. Because especially once we get on with Module 2B, there'll be more stuff to don't feel like we're going backwards. If there's things you want to make sure that gets included, feel free to send them to me. Now, that's all I had. So if anybody else, we can end 5 minutes early if folks want to.
Woohoo!
All right, free play time.
Well, as always, thanks so much to you planning and zoning commissioners. It was good discussion. Thank you.
Thank
Good evening,
you.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Night.
Thank you.